Growing your business can mean big-time logistical questions like, how are we going to keep up with all these local deliveries? Let Uber Direct offer you a helping hand. With Uber Direct, you take orders on your website, app, or by phone. Then drivers who are part of Uber's courier network pick them up from your store and deliver them to your customer's doorstep. Sounds simple, right? Delivery just got better with Uber Direct. Learn more at uberdirect.com. What does the potential Circle K 7-Eleven deal mean for restaurants? Hello, this is Jonathan Mays, Editor-in-Chief of Restaurant Business, and in this week's episode of A Deeper Dive, I speak with Hannah Hammond, the Senior Editor with RB's sister publication, CSP Daily News. CSP covers convenience stores, and I wanted to talk to Hannah about the big news of the week, maybe the year or perhaps the decade, in the convenience store industry, the proposed acquisition of 7 & I Holdings by Alimentation Couche-Tard. 7 & I is the Japanese owner of 7-Eleven, and Alimentation Couche-Tard is the Canadian owner of Circle K. 7-Eleven is the country and world's biggest convenience store chain. Circle K is number 2 in the United States. This is the equivalent of Starbucks proposing to buy McDonald's. We talk about what that deal means for the companies themselves and to the C-store business and whether it could get through the FTC. I doubt it. We also talk about what this means for the respective chains' growing competition with quick service restaurants. And we talk about all kinds of other C-store stuff, including Wawa and Buc-ee's, and why convenience stores can't spell the word quick. We're talking C-stores on A Deeper Dive, so please check it out. All right, I'm here with Hannah Hammond. Hannah, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
Sure. You've probably heard of 7-Eleven, I assume, given your job, and you've also heard of Circle K. How big of a deal is this proposed acquisition of 7 & I Holdings? How big of a deal is that in the C-store world?
It's a huge deal in the C-store world. These are the 2 biggest U.S. C-store chains by store count. 7-Eleven has more than 13,000 U.S. stores and many, many more worldwide. Couche-Tard, which runs the Circle K convenience store chain, has over 7,000 in the U.S. So we're talking the 2 biggest players in the convenience store industry here.
Yeah. So, how do you pronounce it? Is it Alimentation Couche-Tard? Is that what you call it? Yes, I only read it.
They're Canadian. They're based in Laval, Quebec. So okay. I probably am not pronouncing it with the right French accent, but
right. Right. So, I mean, do you guys ever joke around about this? Because, every time in the restaurant space, for instance, our joke is always McDonald's buying Burger King. You ever have a joke like that?
We were just talking about that in our staff meeting this morning. That is absolutely our joke. When we talk about news, we're like, oh, well, it's not as big as 7-Eleven or acquiring Couche-Tard or Couche-Tard acquiring 7-Eleven. So it has been kind of a running joke over the years, and now it might actually be happening.
No. I mean, I got to assume, however, that probably the FTC is going to take a pretty hard look at that.
Yes.
I mean, that probably would be fairly dominant in the C-store industry, wouldn't it? Like if you combine those 2, I mean, you got... What 7-Eleven? You said 7-Eleven is number 1. They've got 13,000 in the United States.
Yeah.
And then 7. That's a huge percentage of the overall C-store industry, isn't it?
It would be, and there's no way the FTC wouldn't look at this, in my opinion. I mean, we saw it recently with 7-Eleven acquiring the Speedway convenience store chain. They had to go through a lot of things, to say the least. A lot of antitrust laws at play there. So yeah, I would assume that if this were to happen, there would have to be some divestitures of stores in the process.
I mean, they would probably have to divest quite a few stores.
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah. We have Speedway in my market. Actually, the interesting thing is the level of merger activity in C-stores, period. So I have a gas station, gas station about a mile from my house. That was a Super America. It was Super America, and then Super America was acquired by Speedway. This I think all happened since 2020. And then Super
Wow.
America was acquired by Speedway, and then Speedway was acquired by 7-Eleven. It's still a Speedway, so I don't get the benefit of the 7-Eleven name yet, but at least I can get a Slurpee. But I mean, it's just the level of merger and acquisition activity, because this isn't even the only deal that Couche-Tard announced on Monday. They also announced another one.
Yes, it's been a really busy day for Couche-Tard. They also announced that they were going to be acquiring the Get-Go convenience store chain, which that's part of the Giant Eagle supermarkets. So yeah, they've been busy.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think? I mean, okay, let's just make the assumption that the FTC says we don't care about convenience store competition anymore, and then they let the deal go through. What do you think? I mean, what do you think this could end up doing? Like, for people who are listening to this, whether they're a restaurant operator or just a convenience store customer, what do you think is this going to do to these two chains? I mean, do you think this could result in major changes? I mean, fundamentally, do we think, for instance, that this is just going to give them a lot more power and enable them to go further into the prepared foods business, for instance, or something like that?
Yeah, definitely could. I mean, when it comes to prepared foods, obviously many C-stores are leaning more and more into food service now as they need to compete with QSRs and as they need to make up money for, declining tobacco sales. So both Circle K's and 7-Eleven have food service programs, and they're, constantly trying to evolve and innovate those. So, I mean, I would imagine that if Couche-Tard does end up acquiring 7-Elevens, they would, implement their food programs, but also could take a lot from 7-Eleven. I mean, 7-Eleven is owned by 7 & I, that's their parent company in Japan. And food service is a lot different there. I think they have some learnings they can take from them for sure of, what we see in Japan at convenience stores. They're, have more advanced with some food service options, some of the technology they have. So I imagine that Couche-Tard would pick some of that up for their stores if the acquisition goes through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 7-Eleven outside of the United States is like a completely different animal. Particularly.
Yeah. It really is. It really is. Yeah.
Yeah. I believe, in fact, that 7-Eleven is the world's second largest franchise right after McDonald's. McDonald's is number one, and then 7-Eleven is right behind in terms of total sales. But it's apparently a way of life. I've never been to Japan, but everything I've heard and read and investigated, it's a completely different animal. And you probably would, if you're Circle K, you'd want to adopt those, more of those strategies, particularly in the United States, where it's a pretty, still a pretty competitive space despite the merger activity. And then, of course, you've got the growing amount of competition between convenience stores and quick service restaurants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, so you said one interesting thing, about cigarettes, about the move into prepared food because of declining cigarette sales. Can you talk a little bit about that? Is really all of this, the fact that I can now get an increasing array of food items beyond roller dogs and frozen burritos at convenience stores? Is that all because they don't sell as many cigarettes?
Yeah, well, that's part of it. I mean, it's fuel margins and tobacco margins in general are lower than the food service margins. I was just at our Outlook Leadership Conference recently, and one retailer who was granted out in California, where they have pretty strict laws when it comes to tobacco selling. He mentioned that he could sell I think it was 4 packs of cigarettes and make the same amount as if he sold one hot dog. So it really makes a difference to them. And yeah, so that's a huge reason why they're leaning into food service more, as well as just leaning in due to, competition. Convenience stores are really trying to make it known that they have just as good as food, they say, as restaurants and QSRs, and that they can be cheaper sometimes too. So that's a huge push.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because years ago, I was talking with a stock investor, and the investor was based in Europe, and worked for some pension funds and whatnot, and we were talking about the tobacco industry because that's what I do all the time. I just randomly talk to people about tobacco. Anyway, she was telling me that she loved investing in tobacco stocks because she said is that anytime the government levied another tax, and of course, as you know, the taxes on cigarettes are insane. Anytime the government just levied a tax, the cigarette companies would just raise their prices and people would pay it anyway. Um, and it made it because it was so addicting. It's a little surprising to me that convenience stores wouldn't necessarily raise the prices of their cigarettes to match their. I mean, if people are paying through the roof anyway, at some point you just charge whatever you want for cigarettes. People still pay it, but apparently not.
I mean, yeah, you're right. To some extent, people are it's still a huge chunk of convenience store sales is cigarettes and tobacco overall. And they are raising prices of them. I mean, the manufacturers are raising prices, and so the retailers are raising prices. So they are raising it, I guess. Yeah, how high can they raise it and still have people buy it? I don't know, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but I guess back to the food part, this isn't a cigarette podcast, I'm afraid. But on the prepared food thing, do you have any sense this year as to whether convenience stores are generating more food service sales or not? So before you answer that question, just let you in on a little thing happening in the fast food world, which is sales are down. Basically, sales are down, especially the last 3, 4, 5 months, because consumers are really frustrated at the prices that they are paying at places like McDonald's or Burger King. Now, I have a sense that sales at McDonald's are recovering because apparently everybody likes these collector's cups that they came out with now. Anyway, but so sales are down in the fast food world because people are frustrated. Do you get any sense that they're going to convenience stores or that convenience stores are getting some sales from fast food restaurants or not?
I do get that sense. Yeah. I mean, I don't have exact numbers in front of me, but from what I hear, sales of food service are up largely in convenience stores. I mean, I think a lot of convenience stores are still learning, still trying new things to expand their offerings. They're building new stores with bigger kitchens. So I think that's part of, why they're making more investments now in food service, because a lot of chains have maybe been behind. So for that reason, their food service sales are growing. So yeah, it's definitely up in many C stores.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do know. Yeah, I mean, we have had some evidence for sure that some of the restaurant traffic has gone to grocery stores, and Walmart has said that. So it would be only natural. I mean, I think the lines are really blurring between restaurants and convenience stores today, especially if you start thinking about the potential growth of electronic vehicles. I mean, I know that lately that growth has been slowed, but restaurants are a potential place where people could get their cars charged, for instance. And then if that happens, then that line gets blurred even further, and stuff like that. But I mean, the food offerings that we see from convenience stores these days are really, really insane. You have, the goings on at Wawa, all the stuff that they do, and how much people love that concept.
Yeah, definitely.
You have Casey's and their pizza offerings. 7-Eleven absolutely pioneered the idea of using convenience stores as a beverage destination. And then you got Buc-ee's in Texas, which is can't even describe it.
That's a whole different thing. Yeah,
it is it is a completely different animal. I mean, the idea of you going to, you can just go. You got to get some because people still need gas, or they whatever else, even or they need some beer or they do need some cigarettes or whatever, and then you making these one-stop shops to me is making these two sectors more and more competitive all the time.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, you talk about the blurring of channels with things being added. And I mean, yeah, I went to a Hy-Vee Fast and Fresh recently, and obviously that's a grocery store chain that has a convenience store, and they had some great chicken there. So it's just interesting to see all the blurring lines, and I'm sure that will continue of, what is a QSR, what's a C-store, what's a grocery store. It's all starting to mash together to some extent.
Mm-hmm. You've been to Quick Trip, I assume, lately?
Yeah, KT or QT. I'm assuming in KT because I'm out in the Midwest here.
Yeah, it's KT.
Yes, they have a great food offering. We do have some Quick Trips with the Q around here now too, but yes, I recently stopped at a Quick Trip with the K on a road trip, and their baked goods are great. that's the standout there for sure.
Can they at least learn to spell the word quick, please? I mean, come
There's
on.
so many different ways to spell quick and convenience. Yeah, I really have to check.
We don't need to get cute. That's true for everybody. I don't care who it is. But anyway, so they're pushing their chicken lately with very cringy ads at their store level.
I haven't seen those ads.
Oh my goodness. I like annoying my kids because nothing my kids hate nothing more than me using their slang. Absolutely hate it. And it's even worse when they look at it and see it at Quick Trip. So they'll advertise it and say chicken that slaps. Which, for me, it's not really something I care about. But I mean, a chicken that slaps. Oh, and this chicken has Riz or something like that. Anyway, I have no idea what any of that means because I'm in my 50s. But it's. I mean, they're the food offerings that you see at these places have been pretty incredible, and making them. And again, I mentioned Wawa. I mean, the quality of the food products that you get out of that place have been very competitive. Now, do you sense why do you? I mean, I guess the bigger question ultimately for me on this, getting back to the 7-Eleven deal, why do they need to do this? I mean, why does Couche-Tard need to buy 7 & I Holdings? Is there why?
That's a great question. I think one, we're still trying to answer. We haven't got an answer from the chain other than that, it would value both companies. But as far as just what I think and what I've heard from, other experts in the industry is part of it is just the Couche-Tard and its owners. They want to be the number one store. No one has a footprint, like we said, like 7-Eleven. And so they have some cash on hand. They want to be number one. So they're trying to go for it. I think that, and just like the geography, the reach of 7-Eleven would be the main reason of why, you would want that. That's my best guess.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't they just buy more convenience stores or take over a bunch of old CVS places? They just abandoned a bunch. Couldn't they expand? Is it tough? Is it just that hard to expand in the United States right now with convenience stores?
They certainly could, and they have made, like we talked about, other acquisitions, smaller acquisitions as well. This would be a huge one. They did actually try to acquire, this was almost, I think, like 14 years ago now. They've tried to acquire Casey's General Stores before, which is the third largest convenience store chain. And while that didn't go through, at the time they talked about that being a great fit for their geography. So it seems like they're trying to eye or buy up the biggest companies. I'm guessing they just want that scale. And like we talked about before, I'm sure there's other things like insights and technology surrounding food service that they'd like to gain from this as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's if I'm not mistaken, I mean, the number of convenience stores in the U.S. isn't actually growing. Is that true? I mean, it's actually pretty stable at this point, or is it growing?
I think it is up a lot. There are, most convenience stores are independents. There's tons of, single store and smaller operators around, and that is shrinking as bigger companies buy them up. I guess I'd have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure they are growing still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just feel that the number of convenience store deals have been again, as I said, insane. CSP
Yeah.
is always publishing some sort of acquisition all the time. I see it almost constantly.
It's true.
And in a space, I mean, there's just not that many companies. There are a bunch of independents, but for the most part, it's really not that many companies, is it?
Yeah, I mean, we have our top 202 list, which is the top 202 largest C-store chains. And just to give an idea, like 7-Eleven's at the top, and maybe chain 202, they have maybe more like 30 stores or something.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, after the top 200 or so, it really does start dropping off into, like 30 or less stores. So a lot more of the independents after that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So now, but Wawa let's talk about Wawa for a minute, because they're probably, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, they're probably the concept that if you talk to any restaurant chain operator, Wawa is almost the first one that they mention. They don't really, I mean, 7-Eleven's been getting into this. I mean, they've got the Laredo Taco Company, for instance. They've got, they've got their own, but you've got Wawa with drive-throughs, and with a really, really loyal following, which we'll actually get to next. And then now they're actually building more locations and expanding, aren't they?
Yeah. Wawa is building and expanding into other locations. I mean, obviously each C-store does it different. Some are more acquirers, some are more building the new stores. But yes, Wawa does like building its new big shiny stores more so than acquiring.
Mm-hmm. So some time ago, I got in trouble on the internet for the egregious sin of calling Wawa a gas station. And that's all I did. Now, I will say my view on that is the same as my view on fast food. What is wrong with being a gas station? Gas stations are fine. Everybody needs gas unless they don't drive or just happen to be driving an electric vehicle. There's nothing particularly wrong with being a gas station. Being a gas station is a need item. I use gas stations all the time. I use them frequently to get beverages when we happen to be somewhere. It's actually a really good source for that to me. And it got me thinking about the loyalty that consumers in many markets love their gas station. And you think about Wawa, and essentially it was people from, Pennsylvania and Ohio who just adore Wawa and didn't like it to be called a gas station. But you have Buc-ee's, who has an absolute, rabid fandom down in Texas. And, Quick Trip in Wisconsin is getting that way. People really love Quick Trip with a K. Casey's to an extent. Why? I mean, that's one of the more fascinating things that we're seeing, to me, the loyalty that customers have towards their convenience store chains.
I think it's just really, they want to be known for more than just gas, right? Like Wawa wants to be known for its sandwiches, for all its other food offerings. They don't want to be known for gas first. And yeah, there's a lot of local loyalty. I would say it's super regional, like you said. Like people in Pennsylvania are going to love their Wawa or love their Sheetz probably. You go out west, for example, there's Maverick is another hugely popular C-store chain. They really brand themselves as, I think their tagline is something like "Adventure's First Stop." So it is pretty common for C-stores to want to be, seen as something else and really make their brand separate from gas. Although, of course, they all do offer gas as well. But I think there's the brand loyalty, works for a lot of them because, people feel strongly about it. People are passionate about what their favorite C-store is. Did I answer your question? I'm just rambling now.
Yes, you did. No, ramble on. That's what most of my guests do. They just ramble on. So
I think I lost my point.
All right, fantastic. So, just looking forward, do you expect to see more of this type of thing? I mean, we're just going to, even like whether the deal goes through or not, I mean, we're just going to continue to see more acquisitions in the space?
We definitely will. I mean, typically it is with more like the mid-sized chains. I don't know if we'll see any more from, the top 10 largest C-stores, although, I mean, it could happen. My guess would be this would be the biggest potential deal we'd see definitely all year, but we'll still continue to see many more mid-size and smaller deals.
Yeah. I actually kind of wonder if Couche-Tard here would want, this is just 100% me speculating, is that I wonder if Couche-Tard just is more, not necessarily interested in the U.S., but is more interested in outside the United States, where, that's where, I don't know how many stores 7-Eleven has outside the United States, but it's more than 10. And I wonder if they just want some of those massive markets outside the United States and might be more tenable to selling off 7-Eleven in the United States to some other player. Knowing the FTC, though, not that I am intimate knowledge of the FTC, it's hard for me to understand that they would go. Because if you look at, do you remember I don't know if you were covering the industry back in, I think it was in 2014 when Cisco tried to buy U.S. Foods.
No, I don't remember.
Yeah, Cisco tried to buy U.S. Foods. The largest distributor tried to buy the number 2 distributor. And that was, the FTC was like, nope, you're not going to do it. Ultimately ended up killing that deal. And I think, this is, number 2 buying number 1, which is, might as well be the same thing. It's hard for me to imagine, unless you wonder, maybe they're just eyeing the stores outside the United States and are perfectly fine on something like that. If that's the case, if they could you conceivably see 7-Eleven sold to some other, 7-Eleven in the United States be sold to some other player, like maybe Casey's or some other company down the line?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible. I don't know what their plans are or what all is involved in this proposed deal as far as, U.S. versus outside the U.S. But, I can't say that there's another chain that I'm like, they would definitely be the ones to pick that up. But as we know, they're always looking for good deals in regions where they want to grow. So with 7-Eleven's footprint, it's definitely possible.
Yeah. I can't. I just have a hard time. I don't know how that number of stores, because that would be 20,000 in the United States. They would obviously have to sell a ton of them at the very least, and then you're going to put all of those convenience stores into the hands of a single company.
It's a lot. It would for sure have to be broken up.
Large number of them that sell gas to U.S. consumers. We're a little bit sensitive to gas prices in the U.S. As you might know. Yeah, just a little bit. And it's just hard for me to imagine that it passes FTC muster without some sort of massive sale. In which case...
Yeah, that's a fair thought.
There you go. That's my 2-cent analysis. Hannah, this was fantastic. Really appreciate you joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And that should do it for this week's episode of A Deeper Dive, which was edited, as always, by Spoons. Artwork by Nico Hines. You may find this and other episodes of the podcast on our website at www.restaurantbusinessonline.com/article/deeper-dive. And you may subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I'm Jonathan Mays, your host, podcast producer, and the editor-in-chief of Restaurant Business. Thank you for listening. Growing your business can mean big-time logistical questions like, how are we going to keep up with all these local deliveries? Let Uber Direct offer you a helping hand. With Uber Direct, you take orders on your website, app, or by phone. Then drivers who are part of Uber's courier network pick them up from your store and deliver them to your customer's doorstep. Sounds simple, right? Delivery just got better with Uber Direct. Learn more at uberdirect.com.